You open your eyes. It's dark. Not the cozy, under-the-covers kind of dark you're accustomed to, where the soft glow of a digital alarm clock or the faint light from a street lamp might filter through your curtains, casting familiar shadows across your bedroom. No, this is a profound, oppressive darkness. A darkness that presses in on you, thick and absolute, a stone wall, no windows, vaguely damp and smelling of regret kind of dark. The air is heavy, stagnant, thick with the scent of unwashed bodies, stale straw, and something else, something metallic and vaguely unpleasant that you can't quite place. It's the pervasive, inescapable smell of 1,000 lives crammed into too small a space, of fear and resignation clinging to the very stones around you, a scent that will soon become sickeningly familiar. Your back aches. Not the familiar ache from a long day hunched over your desk, or an intense workout at the gym that leaves your muscles pleasantly sore. This is a deep, bone-weary soreness, the kind that settles into your very core, a persistent, throbbing pain that tells you something is fundamentally, terribly wrong. It's the result of sleeping on a straw mat, thin and lumpy, laid directly on a cold, hard earthen floor. You didn't choose this mat, nor did you choose this floor. There's no soft mattress, no memory foam, no carefully chosen ergonomic pillow. Just rough, scratchy straw that pokes at your skin, leaving faint red marks, and a chill that seeps into your bones from the damp ground beneath. Every shift, every slight movement, sends a fresh wave of discomfort through your exhausted body. From nearby, you can hear the rhythmic, guttural sounds of snoring, a cacophony of tired breaths, deep and ragged, probably from the other slaves, hundreds of them, packed into this communal sleeping quarter. It's a vast, low-ceilinged chamber, perhaps an underground cellar or a repurposed stable, that feels more like a cavern than a room. The air is thick with their collective exhalations, their unspoken despair. Someone coughs, a wet, hacking sound that echoes slightly in the oppressive silence, a sound of chronic lung irritation from dust and poor air quality. Then, a low murmur, a string of words you don't quite understand. It's Latin, the harsh, unfamiliar sounds of a language you only vaguely remember from school, now spoken by rough, tired voices just feet away, a constant, alien backdrop to your new reality. And you're not in 2025 anymore. The comfort of your modern home, the soft glow of your phone screen, the gentle hum of your refrigerator, the distant rumble of a car on the street outside, all of it is gone. Vanished. Replaced by this chilling, primitive reality. You're in ancient Rome. Not the Rome of grand emperors and magnificent colosseums you've seen in movies. Not the glorious empire of marble and might, but the Rome of the forgotten, the unseen, the utterly powerless. You are in the Rome that built those wonders, but you are not the builder. You are the brick. And, oh, you're a slave. The realization hits you with a cold, sickening jolt, a punch to the gut that steals your breath. You didn't sign up for this. There was no application, no interview, no voluntary agreement, no informed consent. One moment, you were living your life, perhaps scrolling through social media, perhaps planning your next meal, perhaps simply drifting off to sleep in your own bed, secure in your autonomy. The next, you are here. Property, a chattel, a thing. Your very personhood has been stripped away, leaving you hollowed out, a vessel for someone else's will. No coffee, no phone, no memory foam mattress, no freedom, just the stark, unyielding reality of your new existence. This is the start of your first, and probably last, full day as a Roman slave. The sun has not yet risen, but your day has already begun, a day that will demand everything from you and offer nothing in return. Let's see how long you last. Spoiler, not very. Your soft, modern life, filled with choices, comforts, and an inherent understanding of personal rights, has simply not prepared you for the brutal, dehumanizing grind that awaits you. Every instinct, every expectation, every learned coping mechanism will be utterly useless here. The sheer physical demands, the constant psychological pressure, the complete lack of autonomy, the ever-present threat of arbitrary violence, it will overwhelm you. Your body, accustomed to convenience and rest, will quickly fail. Your mind, accustomed to self-determination and dignity, will struggle to cope with the utter powerlessness. You are about to experience the true meaning of powerlessness in a world that views you as nothing more than a talking tool, a disposable asset in the vast machinery of the Roman Empire. The very air you breathe feels different, heavier, laden with the weight of centuries of oppression. This is not a simulation. This is your new, terrifying reality. The day begins not with the gentle chime of an alarm or the gradual brightening of the sky outside your window, signaling the start of a new, hopeful day. It begins well before dawn, in the deepest, most oppressive part of the pre-morning darkness. The stars are still pinpricks in the inky blackness outside, if you could even see them. And it doesn't begin because you're eager to start your day, or because you have personal ambitions to pursue, or a schedule to adhere to. It begins because the overseer, a man whose facial expression is permanently set to mildly annoyed, even when he's delivering a kick to your ribs or a brutal crack of a whip against the wall near your head, wakes you up. Not with a polite tap or a call to rise, but with a sharp, painful jolt to your side, or a guttural shout in Latin that you instinctively understand means move. The message is clear, immediate, and leaves no room for negotiation. Wake up, now. Your time is not your own. You scramble to your feet, your muscles protesting with a dull, persistent ache that has become your constant companion. Your mind is still foggy with the remnants of a restless, shallow sleep, but the adrenaline of fear quickly cuts through the haze. Hesitation, even a moment's delay, is not an option. It gets you whipped. It gets you singled out. It gets you noticed in the worst possible way, drawing the overseer's cruel attention. The fear of punishment is a constant, low-level hum beneath every action, every thought, every agonizing breath. It's the primary motivator, the invisible chain that binds you even before the physical ones are applied, a psychological torment that gnaws at your very soul. You're one of hundreds here, perhaps even thousands, on a vast Roman farm, a latifundium. This isn't some quaint, small holding, a picturesque vineyard or olive grove. This is an industrial-scale agricultural enterprise, stretching for miles across the landscape, worked by an army of enslaved labor. The sheer scale is staggering, a testament to Roman ambition and their ruthless efficiency. The land is owned by a man who calls himself a statesman, a senator perhaps, or a wealthy equestrian, a member of Rome's elite. He lives a life of unimaginable luxury in Rome itself, or in a sprawling villa on the sunny coast, far removed from the dirt, sweat, and suffering that generates his immense wealth. He hasn't lifted a finger in 2 decades, perhaps never in his life, yet he owns every blade of grass, every olive tree, every head of livestock, and every single one of you. You are merely a line item in his ledger, a unit of production. Your first task of the day, before the faintest hint of dawn touches the horizon, before the morning mist has even begun to lift, is grain grinding. You are herded into a vast, dimly lit room, filled with the groaning, rasping sounds of stone against stone. The air in the grinding room is thick with dust, fine particles of barley and wheat that coat your throat and lungs, making every breath a minor irritation, a constant, rasping cough. You are hunched over a stone mill, a massive, unyielding contraption that laughs at your modern biceps, at your gym-toned physique, at your pampered muscles. This isn't a machine that does the work for you. You are the machine. You push the heavy upper stone against the lower, round and round, feeling the immense resistance, hearing the grating, rasping sound of grain being crushed. It's a monotonous, repetitive, soul-crushing task that demands constant, unthinking, brute force effort, hour after hour. Your fingers blister almost immediately. The rough, abrasive stone, the constant friction, the sheer duration of the task, your soft, uncalloused hands, accustomed to keyboards and touch screens, to gentle textures and ergonomic designs, are utterly unprepared. The skin tears, raw and painful, but you cannot stop. The overseer is watching, his eyes like daggers, always scanning for a faltering pace. Your back screams in protest, a persistent, burning ache from the unnatural, hunched posture and the relentless strain. Your stomach gurgles, a hollow, desperate sound, a constant reminder of the gnawing hunger within. There's no breakfast until after the second hour, which means several more hours of this grueling labor on an empty stomach. The hunger pangs are a constant companion, a dull, gnawing sensation that reminds you of your deprivation, of your body's desperate need for fuel. If you faint from exhaustion, from hunger, from the sheer, overwhelming pain, you get dragged, unceremoniously, like a sack of unwanted refuse, pulled from the mill and tossed aside. Maybe you're beaten for your weakness, a sharp, stinging reminder that your body is not your own, that it must perform regardless of its limits, regardless of your pain. Maybe you're simply replaced by another slave, a stark demonstration of your utter dispensability. You are, after all, very replaceable. There are always more bodies, more captives, more people desperate enough to be sold. Your individual suffering means nothing. Your life has no inherent value beyond your capacity for labor. And remember, no shoes. Romans didn't think you needed those. Your bare feet, soft and pampered from a lifetime of cushioned footwear, are exposed to the rough earth, the sharp stones, the animal droppings, the cold dampness of winter mornings, the scorching heat of summer noons. Every step is a minor ordeal, a constant reminder of your low status, your utter lack of protection, your complete vulnerability. The ground is your constant, unyielding companion, and it offers no comfort, only more pain, more cuts, more scrapes, more potential for infection. This is your morning. This is your misery. And this is just the beginning of your day, a relentless cycle that will continue until your body finally gives out. The chilling reality of your situation begs a fundamental, agonizing question. How did you end up here? In your modern life, you are surrounded by laws, by rights, by protections designed to safeguard your autonomy and dignity. The very idea of suddenly becoming someone else's property, a mere chattel, is an unthinkable horror, a concept relegated to history books and dystopian fiction. But in ancient Rome, it was not a theoretical construct. It was a pervasive, fundamental aspect of society, a constant shadow lurking at the edges of existence for vast swathes of the population. There were many paths to servitude, and none of them involved your consent, your choice, or your will. Perhaps you were captured in war. This was, by far, the most common and brutal route into Roman slavery. Imagine yourself as a free person, living a life of relative normalcy in a small village in Gaul, or a bustling city in Greece, or a fertile valley in North Africa. You were tending your fields, raising your family, participating in your community's rituals, speaking your own language, living by your own customs. Then, the legions arrived. The thunder of their marching boots, a sound that shook the very ground. The terrifying glint of their armor, reflecting the sun. The chilling efficiency of their military machine, an unstoppable force. A Roman general, driven by ambition, by the insatiable need for plunder, by the desire for glory, or simply by the imperialistic imperative of expanding the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which often meant peace through conquest, decided your homeland looked better with a few Roman temples, a new road, and a fresh supply of labor. Your village was sacked. Your people were defeated, their resistance crushed with brutal efficiency. You, along with thousands of others, were rounded up, chained, and marched for weeks, sometimes months, across vast distances. This forced march, often with inadequate food and water, was a brutal culling. Many perished along the way, succumbing to hunger, thirst, disease, or sheer exhaustion. Those who faltered were left behind, or summarily executed. You were then brought to a slave market, perhaps in Rome itself, a bustling, chaotic hub of human commerce, or a major port city like Delos, the ancient world's largest slave market. There, you were stripped naked, subjected to a humiliating, dehumanizing examination, scrutinized like livestock. Your teeth, your muscles, your physique, your general health, all were assessed by potential buyers, their eyes cold and calculating. Your language, your culture, your very identity, your family name, all stripped away, replaced by a new, often dismissive Latin name, a number, and a price tag. Your past, your heritage, your memories, all irrelevant. Your future? Determined by the whim of a stranger, a roll of the dice in a cruel game. Or maybe your parents were slaves. You were born into it. This was another significant and increasingly common source of Roman slaves, known as verni. From the moment of your birth, your fate was sealed. You were the property of your mother's owner. You never knew freedom, never experienced the concept of self-ownership, never even conceived of a life where your body and will were your own. Your childhood, if you could call it that, was spent learning obedience, performing small tasks, and understanding your place at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. Your entire existence was defined by the needs and desires of your master, a life of inherited suffering. There was no escape, no appeal, no alternative. This was your birthright, a cruel inheritance. You could have also been sold. Debt slavery, though less common in the later Republic and Empire than in earlier periods, still existed in various forms, particularly in the provinces or among non-citizens. Couldn't pay your taxes? Couldn't repay a loan? Your family, or even you yourself, could be seized and sold to settle the debt. Perhaps you were a Roman citizen who fell on hard times, a provincial farmer whose crops failed for several seasons in a row, leaving you destitute. The line between poverty and servitude could be terrifyingly thin, a single bad harvest or a sudden illness away. Or perhaps you were simply unlucky, caught by pirates who operated with impunity across the Mediterranean, seizing ships and coastal communities, selling their human cargo to the highest bidder. One moment, you were a free traveler, a merchant, a fisherman. The next, you were a commodity, bound for the auction block. The Romans didn't consider you fully human. This is a crucial, chilling distinction that underpins the entire system. You were res a thing, a piece of property, legally indistinguishable from a tool, a piece of furniture, or an animal. You were a service, a slave, and legally, you had no rights that your master was bound to respect. You could not own property, marry legally. Any union was a contubernium, not a legal marriage, or make contracts. You could not testify in court against a free person, nor could you appeal a master's decision. Your life, your body, your labor, your very being, all belonged to someone else. The Roman philosopher Seneca, himself a Stoic who advocated for humane treatment of slaves, still referred to them as living tools. This was the prevailing mindset. You were a living tool, a talking mop, a breathing machine designed to work. Your identity is gone. the name your parents gave you, the traditions you held dear, the personal history that shaped who you are, all of it is irrelevant. Your past, if it existed outside of servitude, is a forgotten dream, a whisper of a life that no longer exists. Your future? Statistically, very short. The average lifespan of a Roman slave, particularly those in the mines, on large agricultural estates, or in the gladiatorial arena, was brutally brief. You were worked until you broke, until your body could no longer perform, then discarded, often left to die or sold for a pittance. This is the stark, dehumanizing reality of your new existence, a reality your modern mind struggles to comprehend, let alone accept. It is a world where your very humanity is denied, where your existence is purely utilitarian, and where your suffering is simply the cost of doing business. After 3 grueling hours of grain grinding, your muscles screaming, your throat raw with dust, and your stomach a hollow, aching void, the moment finally arrives. The overseer barks a command, and you, along with hundreds of others, shuffle towards a designated area. You are handed a bowl, likely a rough, unglazed earthenware vessel, chipped and stained from countless previous uses. Your hopes, however faint, might momentarily flicker with the thought of something warm, something substantial, something that might truly quell the insistent hunger pangs. But those hopes are quickly dashed. Inside the bowl is gruel, barley-based, almost certainly, as barley was a cheap and readily available grain. It's thin, watery, and room temperature, or perhaps even cold, depending on how long it's been sitting out in a communal vat, exposed to the elements and whatever airborne particles might drift into it. The consistency is somewhere between watery porridge and a thick soup with visible flecks of barley. The taste is bland, monotonous, and utterly uninspiring. A flat, earthy flavor with no seasoning, no salt, no hint of anything appetizing. It's designed purely for sustenance, to provide just enough calories to keep you functioning, to prevent you from collapsing from starvation, but certainly not to provide pleasure or nourishment. It might have been stirred with a stick last used for poking oxen, or perhaps for cleaning out a trough. Hygiene, as you understand it, is a concept utterly alien to this environment. The bowl itself is likely rough, unwashed, and shared among countless others throughout the day, perhaps rinsed cursorily between uses or not at all. If you're incredibly lucky, there might be a single, shriveled fig floating in the gruel, or a few olives, or a small, hard piece of stale bread, perhaps a day or 2 old, so tough it could break a tooth. These are rare treats, not a daily occurrence, and certainly not something to be expected. This meager ration is your fuel for the next several hours of backbreaking labor. It's barely enough to quiet the most insistent hunger pangs, let alone provide the energy your body desperately needs to perform the arduous tasks ahead. Your modern metabolism, accustomed to regular, balanced meals, would be in shock. Your water? It's stored in a shared jar, a large, earthenware vessel that sits in the center of the communal eating area. There's no filtration, no purification, no concept of boiling. It's simply drawn from a well or a nearby stream, and it's been double-dipped by 10, 20, perhaps 50 other slaves before you. Hands, often unwashed and covered in the grime of labor, plunge into the water. Cups, if they exist, are shared, or you simply cup your hands and drink directly from the jar. Hope you like ancient bacteria. Your modern immune system, accustomed to filtered water, sanitized environments, and a wide array of antibiotics, would likely revolt almost immediately. Dysentery, typhoid, cholera, and a host of other waterborne illnesses are a constant, invisible threat, a common cause of sickness, debilitating weakness, and premature death among the enslaved population. A simple stomach bug could be a death sentence. Meanwhile, A stark contrast plays out just a few miles away, or perhaps even within the same large estate, in the master's opulent villa. Your master, the statesman who hasn't lifted a finger in 2 decades, is feasting. His breakfast is not a meal. It's an indulgence, a carefully curated display of wealth and power. Imagine platters piled high with fresh olives, glistening with the finest olive oil, alongside an assortment of rich cheeses, perhaps soft goat cheese or aged sheep's milk cheese. There are roasted birds, perhaps plump quail, delicate dove, or even exotic pheasant, seasoned with rare and expensive spices imported from the distant east, like pepper from India or cinnamon from Arabia. Fresh fruits, sweet and ripe, picked at their peak, are artfully arranged in bowls: grapes, figs, apples, pears, and dates. Warm, freshly baked bread, soft and fragrant, made from the finest wheat flour, is brought directly from the villa's own kitchen, still steaming from the oven. And to drink, fine wine, diluted with pure, clean water drawn from a private well, or perhaps a honeyed beverage, or even exotic fruit juices. The aroma alone would be intoxicating, a cruel reminder of the vast chasm between your existence and his. The disparity is not just about food, it's about dignity, about status, about the very definition of humanity. You are fueled by bitterness and the bare minimum of carbohydrates, just enough to keep your body moving. A machine for labor, a disposable asset. Your master is fueled by luxury, by the fruits of your unseen, unacknowledged toil, by the very labor that is slowly killing you. The psychological impact of this contrast is immense. To know that such abundance exists, that your labor directly contributes to it, yet to be denied even a crumb of it, is a constant, gnawing humiliation. You eat quickly, silently, your eyes downcast, for lingering or showing any sign of discontent, or even making eye contact with a free person, is another pathway to punishment. This is the breakfast of Roman slaves, a stark, unappetizing testament to your place in their world, a daily reminder that you are less than human. Let's talk career opportunities in ancient Rome, specifically for you, the newly enslaved. Forget your LinkedIn profile, your resume, your carefully cultivated skills, your aspirations for professional growth. Your career path is now entirely dictated by your master's needs, your physical capabilities, your perceived intelligence, and, perhaps, a sliver of luck. And almost without exception, these opportunities are grueling, dangerous, utterly devoid of personal satisfaction, and often deeply humiliating. Your life is now a series of tasks, performed under duress, with no end in sight. Domestic slave, familia urbana. If you are deemed suitable for household work, perhaps because you are young, relatively unblemished, possess some basic literacy, or have a pleasing appearance, you might become a domestic slave. This sounds like a step up from the brutal conditions of the fields or mines, and in some superficial ways it is. You work indoors, are generally better fed, and might even wear slightly cleaner tunics. But this better comes with its own unique set of miseries, a psychological cage that can be just as debilitating as physical chains. Your days are spent in constant service. You clean floors, which are often made of intricate mosaic or highly polished stone, requiring endless scrubbing, sweeping, and polishing to maintain their luster. You wash clothes by hand, pounding them against rocks or using harsh lye and urine as detergents, then drying them in the sun, a laborious and often unpleasant task. You hold chamber pots, emptying the human waste of your masters and their guests, a task that is both physically unpleasant and deeply humiliating, a constant reminder of your servile status. You might be tasked with dressing your master or mistress, meticulously arranging their elaborate togas or stolas, performing intimate personal hygiene tasks for them, like bathing, oiling, and even plucking their body hair. You might also carry them in a litter through the crowded, noisy streets of Rome, enduring the stares and occasional jeers of passers-by, a human beast of burden. You exist in the background, a silent fixture, a shadow moving through the opulent rooms. You also hold opinions, of course, a lifetime of modern thought, personal beliefs, and critical observations. But you're not allowed to share them. Expressing discontent, offering unsolicited advice, or even simply looking bored or tired could lead to swift and severe repercussions. You must master the art of invisibility, moving through the household like a ghost, anticipating needs without being seen, heard, or acknowledged as a person. You become an extension of your master's will, your personality suppressed, your individuality erased. The constant scrutiny from a moody Roman matron, who might yell in poetry or prose, or simply with a piercing shriek, is a relentless psychological burden. Every gesture, every facial expression, every moment of your day is under observation, judged, and potentially found wanting. Your life is a performance of subservience. Field slave, familia rustica. This is arguably the most common lot for the vast majority of Roman slaves, especially those on large latifundia. Your life is dictated entirely by the sun, from its first faint glow to its final fiery descent. Sun up to sundown, you are in the fields, a tiny cog in a massive agricultural machine, plowing the hard earth with primitive tools, often yoked alongside oxen, feeling the immense strain in every muscle, your shoulders aching from the constant pull. Harvesting crops, wheat, barley, grapes, olives, under the relentless, unforgiving Mediterranean sun, your skin burning, your throat parched. Planting seeds, bending over for hours, your back screaming in protest, your hands raw and blistered. All while wearing a simple tunic that's basically a rough, itchy towel, offering little protection from the elements, the biting insects, or the sharp thorns of the plants. The work is back-breaking, monotonous, and physically destructive. Your body, accustomed to climate-controlled environments, ergonomic chairs, and regular breaks, will break down rapidly. Sunstroke, dehydration, heat exhaustion, and injuries from crude tools are constant threats. The overseer, often a slave himself but one granted authority and a measure of brutality, watches your every move, ready to whip any perceived slackers to drive you harder. There's no shade, no breaks beyond the most basic necessities, and no end in sight. Just the endless cycle of agricultural labor, season after season, until your body finally gives out, broken and useless. Mind slave, servi metallici, congratulations, you've chosen the absolute worst job in the entire Roman Empire. If the fields were brutal, the mines are a descent into a living hell. Life expectancy in the Roman mines was hilariously low, often just a few years, sometimes mere months. Conditions are unimaginable. You are sent deep underground, into dark, cramped, suffocating tunnels. The air is thick with dust, silica dust from the rock, which will slowly but surely destroy your lungs, leading to silicosis and a slow, agonizing death. It's also filled with the fumes of lamps, the stench of sweat, human waste, and the pervasive odor of despair. There's no proper ventilation, no safety regulations, no concept of worker protection. Cave-ins are a constant threat, burying workers alive in an instant. The work is relentless, chipping away at rock faces with picks and hammers, often in contorted positions, hauling heavy baskets of or to the surface, often crawling through narrow passages on your hands and knees. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the flickering, smoky light of a small oil lamp, which itself consumes precious oxygen and adds to the oppressive heat. The sounds are deafening. The clang of tools, the groans of exhausted men, the drip of water, the occasional rumble of shifting earth, the distant shouts of overseers. Many mine slaves were criminals or political prisoners, considered the lowest of the low, and treated with an almost casual, brutal cruelty. You will experience constant physical pain, respiratory distress, and the profound psychological torment of knowing that every day brings you closer to an inevitable, agonizing end. It is, quite literally, a horror movie, and you are the unwilling star, trapped in a subterranean nightmare. Galley slave. Remedies. If you manage to avoid the mines, you might find yourself chained to a bench as a galley slave. This is a unique form of torture, combining physical exhaustion with the constant, disorienting motion of the sea. You are one of many, packed shoulder to shoulder, often naked or in minimal clothing, on a rowing bench below deck. Your legs are shackled to the bench, your wrists to the oar. You'll never leave this ship, not until you die or the ship sinks, taking you with it. Your rhythm must match the drumbeat, a relentless, hypnotic thrum that dictates the pace of your strokes. Up, pull, down, push. Hour after hour, day after day, your muscles burn, your hands blister, your back aches from the constant strain. Seasickness? Too bad. Vomiting is common, but you cannot stop rowing. The stench of sweat, vomit, human waste, and stale seawater is overwhelming, a suffocating miasma. The air is stifling, especially below deck, with little fresh air or ventilation. The only respite is the brief moments when the ship is docked, but even then, you remain chained to your bench. This is an existence of constant motion, physical agony, and the profound claustrophobia of being trapped on a floating prison, your life entirely dependent on the whims of the sea and the will of your master. Other less desirable roles. Beyond these major categories, there were countless other specialized, often equally grim, roles. You might be a gladiator, forced to fight to the death for public entertainment, your life a spectacle for the masses. You could be a prostitute, your body exploited for your master's profit, with no agency or protection. You might be a public slave, owned by the state, performing tasks like maintaining public baths, roads, or sewers, often in unsanitary and dangerous conditions. Or perhaps a shepherd, isolated for months on end with only animals for company, exposed to the elements and the threat of bandits. All of these positions come with zero benefits, unless you count not being crucified as a perk. There's no sick leave, no vacation, no retirement plan, no health insurance. Your value is purely in your labor, your capacity to produce for your master. When you can no longer work, when your body is broken, when you become a burden rather than an asset, you are discarded, often left to die or sold for a pittance to someone who will work you until your very last breath. This is the career ladder of a Roman slave, a descent into endless, brutal toil. In your modern life, the concept of discipline usually involves consequences like a verbal warning, a written reprimand, a fine, or perhaps a suspension from work. There are legal frameworks, human resources departments, and a general expectation of due process. In ancient Rome, for a slave, the line between discipline and outright torture was not merely thin, it was non-existent. Any transgression, real or imagined, minor or severe, could unleash a torrent of brutal retribution, designed not just to punish the individual, but to terrorize the entire enslaved population, to break the spirit, and to assert absolute, unquestionable power. Let's say you trip and break a jug. Perhaps it was an accident, a momentary lapse of coordination from exhaustion, a slippery floor, or simply bad luck. In your old life, you'd apologize, perhaps offer to pay for it. or simply be told to be more careful, maybe even receive a sympathetic glance. Here, the broken pottery is not just a lost item. It's an act of defiance, a challenge to your master's property, an unforgivable inefficiency, a direct financial loss. The value of the jug, however small, far outweighs your human worth in the eyes of your owner. Your master has a terrifying array of options at his disposal and no legal authority to stop him. The paterfamilias, the head of the Roman household, held absolute power, patria potestas, over his family and his slaves, including the power of life and death. There was no court to appeal to, no ombudsman, no human rights organization. His word was law. Here are some of the disciplinary tools he might employ. Flogging, the classic. This is the most common and immediate form of punishment, a brutal staple of slave life. You are stripped, often tied to a post, a tree, or laid across a bench, and beaten with whips, rods, vergae, or even bundles of sticks, fasces without the axe, used by lictors. The blows are not light taps. They are meant to tear flesh, to inflict excruciating pain, to leave lasting, visible scars. The number of lashes can range from a few stinging blows to hundreds, leaving you a bloody, raw mess, your skin flayed, your muscles bruised and torn. The pain is unimaginable, a searing agony that consumes your entire being, leaving you gasping for breath, your body trembling long after the beating stops. Recovery could take weeks, during which you would still be expected to work, compounding the suffering. Branding, stigma, to make sure everyone knows you're a klutz. For more serious offenses, or for runaway slaves, branding was a common and deeply humiliating practice. A hot iron, often shaped with a letter, like F for fugitivus, runaway, or K for calumnia, slander, or even the master's initials, would be pressed into your skin, usually on your forehead, or sometimes on your arm or leg. The smell of burning flesh, the searing pain, the permanent disfigurement. It's a mark that screams your status, your crime, your master's ownership. It's a public humiliation, a constant reminder of your transgression, a visible sign of your degradation, and a terrifying warning to other slaves. You are literally marked as property, your humanity further eroded. Shackling, nervous, a timeless favorite for slaves deemed rebellious, prone to running, or simply needing to be kept in line, permanent shackles were common. Heavy iron chains could be fastened around your ankles, wrists, or even your neck. These aren't decorative. They are designed to restrict your movement, to make every step a laborious effort, to prevent escape, and to serve as a constant physical and psychological burden. You would sleep in them, work in them, live in them, the constant clanking a grim soundtrack to your existence, a perpetual reminder of your captivity. Forced labor in the ergastulum or quarries. For severe disobedience, a slave might be condemned to the ergastulum, a private prison on a rural estate, often underground, where slaves were chained and forced to perform grueling labor, usually at night or when not working in the fields. The conditions were horrific, designed to break the will. Even worse was being sold or condemned to work in the state-owned quarries or mines, which, as discussed, were essentially death sentences. Being sold to the mines is a master's way of saying, "You are utterly worthless to me, and I wish to be rid of you in the most profitable and painful way possible." It's a punishment reserved for the most intractable, the most rebellious, or simply those whose masters wish to make a terrifying example. Crucifixion. This was the ultimate, most terrifying punishment, reserved for the most heinous crimes by slaves, such as murder of a master, or for large-scale rebellion. It was a slow, agonizing public execution designed to maximize pain, humiliation, and serve as a terrifying deterrent. The victim was nailed or tied to a large wooden cross and left to die of exhaustion, asphyxiation, or shock. The body was often left on the cross for days, a gruesome spectacle along major roads, a chilling warning to anyone contemplating defiance. But the horror doesn't stop at individual punishment. Roman law, in its cold, brutal logic, had an even more terrifying provision: collective punishment. Oh, and if a slave kills a master? Roman law, specifically the Lex Cornelia de Sicarius et Veneficis, demanded that every single slave in that household, regardless of their involvement, their knowledge, or their innocence, be executed. This wasn't a rare occurrence. It was a codified legal principle, a chilling testament to the Roman fear of slave revolt and their absolute valuation of a master's life over the lives of his property. Imagine the terror. A master is found dead, perhaps from natural causes, perhaps by accident, perhaps by the hand of a single, desperate slave. And suddenly, you, the domestic slave who merely cleaned the floors, the tutor who taught the master's children, the cook who prepared his meals, the child slave playing in the courtyard, all of you are rounded up, condemned, and led to your deaths. There is no trial, no defense, no mercy. This was a deliberate strategy, a chillingly effective deterrent. It fostered an environment of intense surveillance and fear among slaves themselves. No slave would dare to conspire against the master, knowing that their actions could condemn not just themselves, but their friends, their family, their entire community within the household. It made every slave an unwitting informant, a silent guardian of the master's life, for their own survival depended on it. Collective punishment. Just another day in ancient Rome, where human life, particularly enslaved human life, was cheap, disposable, and utterly devoid of inherent value. The thin line between discipline and torture was a mirage. It was all torture, all the time, designed to maintain absolute control through absolute fear, a constant reminder that your life was not your own and could be extinguished at any moment. You might look at the brutal reality of field or mine slavery, the sun-scorched earth, the suffocating darkness, the constant physical agony, and think, surely, house slaves have it better. And in some superficial ways, perhaps. They work indoors, are generally better fed, and might even wear slightly cleaner tunics. They are spared the harshest physical exposure and the most rapid physical decay. But this better comes with its own insidious forms of misery, a psychological cage that can be just as debilitating, if not more so, than physical chains. It is a life of invisible torment, where your mind and spirit are constantly under siege. If by better, you mean working indoors under constant, unrelenting scrutiny from a moody Roman matron who yells in poetry, or perhaps in a high-pitched, piercing shriek that cuts through the silence of the villa, then yes, it's better. You are always on display, always observed. There is no privacy, no moment where you can truly relax or be yourself, no corner where you can truly be alone with your thoughts. Every gesture, every facial expression, every moment of your day is under observation, judged, and potentially found wanting. The matron might be capricious, her moods shifting like the wind, her temper unpredictable. You must learn to anticipate her whims, to read her subtle cues, her unspoken desires, lest you incur her wrath. A misplaced fold in her elaborate toga, a lukewarm bath, a dish served a moment too late, a perceived insolence in your gaze. Any of these could lead to a severe beating, a humiliating public reprimand, or worse, being sold to a harsher master. Your duties are varied and constant, demanding meticulous attention and endless patience. You serve meals, often elaborate multi-course banquets, convivia, that last for hours, standing silently by, ready to refill a cup, fetch a new dish, or wipe a spill, while the rich Romans gorged themselves, drink heavily, and discuss philosophy, politics, or gossip. You memorize guest names, their social standing, their preferences, so you can address them correctly and anticipate their needs, ensuring the smooth flow of the evening. You might be a tricliniarchus, overseeing the dining room, or a postulator, serving drinks. You master the art of invisibility, being present, attentive, and utterly subservient, yet fading into the background, a silent, unacknowledged presence. You are expected to anticipate needs before they are even voiced, to move with quiet efficiency, to be an extension of the household, never an individual with thoughts or feelings of your own. If you're quiet, obedient, and lucky, you'll be rewarded with not being punished. This is the highest aspiration for a house slave. The absence of pain, the absence of overt cruelty, the quiet survival of another day. There are no bonuses, no promotions, no genuine praise. Just the quiet relief of having survived another day without incident, without drawing negative attention. Your existence is defined by what you don't experience: the whip, the branding iron, the sale to the mines. This is your good life. But being a favorite slave wasn't as lucky as it sounds. In fact, it could be a gilded cage, fraught with its own unique dangers and psychological tortures. If you were particularly skilled, intelligent, aesthetically pleasing, or had a charming demeanor, you might become a personal attendant, a cubicularius, chamberlain, a pedicquus, footman, or even a nomenclator, who memorized names for the master to impress guests. This meant closer proximity to the master or mistress, and while it might offer slightly better food, finer clothing, or less physically demanding tasks, it also meant more intense scrutiny and pressure. You are constantly under the master's or mistress's eye, your performance and loyalty always being judged. Any mistake, however small, is magnified, as it reflects directly on the master. The pressure to be perfect, to anticipate every need, to never falter, is immense. Jealousy from other slaves. Your elevated position would inevitably breed resentment and jealousy among other slaves in the household. This could make you a target for sabotage, false accusations, or subtle forms of undermining, as others vie for favor or simply resent your comparatively better lot. The internal politics of a large Roman household could be as cutthroat and dangerous as any imperial court. Sexual exploitation. For both male and female slaves, being a favorite often meant being subjected to the master's or mistress's sexual desires. Consent was not a concept that applied to slaves. Their bodies were considered property, to be used as the owner saw fit. This was a common, horrifying reality, leaving deep psychological scars and offering no recourse or protection. A slave could be forced into sexual acts, bear children who would also be slaves, and have their relationships with other slaves or free people utterly disregarded. Being a pawn. You might become a pawn in your master's social games, used to impress guests with your beauty or skill, or even offered as a gift to another powerful Roman as a sign of respect or alliance, severing any fragile bonds you might have formed within the household. Your life, your relationships, your very body were not your own, but tools in your master's social and political maneuvering. Emotional manipulation. Masters might cultivate a false sense of intimacy or affection, only to withdraw it arbitrarily, leaving the slave emotionally vulnerable and dependent. This manipulation further blurred the lines of power and control. So, while the house slave might avoid the sunstroke of the fields or the dust of the mines, they endured a different, often more insidious, kind of torment. The constant psychological pressure, the erasure of self, the ever-present threat of arbitrary cruelty, and the insidious nature of being a favored possession. This was a life of invisible chains, where the mind and spirit were just as enslaved as the body, a constant battle for psychological survival in a world that denied your very humanity. The Roman system of slavery was vast and incredibly complex, encompassing far more than just brute physical labor. It was a sophisticated, multi-tiered institution that permeated every aspect of Roman society and economy. Some slaves, particularly those captured from the more Hellenized East, Greece, Asia Minor, Egypt, were highly educated, possessing skills and knowledge that were invaluable to their Roman masters. They were intellectuals, artists, skilled artisans, and professionals, and their talents were eagerly exploited to serve the Roman elite. You might find yourself in the paradoxical position of being a teacher, pedagogus, an accountant, dispensator, a doctor, medicus, a scribe, librarius, an architect, architectus, or even an artist, musician, or actor. Educated Greeks, especially, were in incredibly high demand. They brought with them the sophisticated knowledge of Greek philosophy, science, medicine, literature, and rhetoric, which the Romans admired, often appropriated, and used to educate their own children and manage their complex affairs. Imagine your new role. You might tutor a senator's son. This child, a spoiled Roman brat, accustomed to every whim being indulged, might throw precious scrolls across the room in a tantrum or tell you you're stupid in Latin, despite your superior intellect and profound knowledge. You are tasked with imparting wisdom, with shaping his mind, with teaching him the very concepts of freedom, citizenship, and civic virtue that are utterly denied to you. You are the fount of knowledge, the repository of culture, yet you are utterly powerless, a mere instrument in his education. The irony is a bitter pill to swallow. You are smarter than him. You know more than him. You can read, write, calculate complex sums, perhaps even speak multiple languages fluently, Greek, Latin, maybe your native tongue. You understand philosophy, history, rhetoric, mathematics, and the intricacies of Roman law. But he owns you. That's the cruel, elegant trick of Rome. Your knowledge, your intelligence, your very intellectual capacity is not your own. It is a commodity, a tool for your master's benefit, a means to enhance his status, manage his wealth, or educate his children. It is a resource to be exploited, not a personal attribute to be respected. This is the profound paradox of knowing too much. For an educated slave, knowledge was not power. Not here. Instead, it could be a source of profound mental anguish, a constant, gnawing awareness of your own intellectual capacity trapped within the confines of servitude. You understand the injustices, the hypocrisy, the philosophical arguments for freedom and human dignity that are utterly denied to you. This awareness can breed a deep, festering resentment, a constant internal scream against the invisible chains that bind your mind as well as your body. You are acutely aware of the chasm between your inner world of thought and your outer reality of servitude. Your education was for your master, not for your own advancement or liberation. You might be a brilliant physician, capable of saving lives, but your skills are used exclusively to heal your master's family and friends, not to establish your own practice, earn your own wealth, or choose your own patients. You might be a gifted scribe, meticulously copying texts, preserving ancient wisdom, but the words you write are not your own thoughts, and the knowledge you preserve is not for your own liberation. You are a living library, a walking calculator, a breathing instrument of instruction, a human database, but you are not free to choose your own path, to pursue your own intellectual curiosity, or to truly benefit from your own genius. The master, too, might harbor a subtle, underlying fear of your intelligence. A slave who knows too much, who understands the world too well, who possesses a sharp mind, might be more prone to rebellion, more capable of deception, more dangerous. So, while your skills are valued, you are still watched, still controlled, still reminded of your place. Your intellect is a valuable asset, but it is also a potential threat, and it is always subservient to the will of your owner. This intellectual slavery, the mental anguish of a sharp mind trapped in a servile body, is a torment far more subtle, but no less profound, than the physical pain of the fields or the mines. It is a constant, internal battle, a silent scream against the injustice of your existence. The thought of running away, of simply breaking free from this nightmare, will inevitably cross your mind. It's a primal instinct, a desperate yearning for the freedom that has been so cruelly ripped from you. You'll envision yourself slipping away in the dead of night, finding refuge in a distant city, starting a new life under a false identity. But the reality of escape in ancient Rome was a brutal, almost insurmountable challenge, a desperate gamble with overwhelmingly stacked odds. Others have tried, of course. The most famous, the legendary Spartacus, his name a beacon of desperate hope and ultimate tragedy for the enslaved, a terrifying warning for the Romans. Remember him? A Thracian gladiator, a big guy, a formidable warrior, trained for combat. He led a massive slave revolt, an army of the oppressed, the desperate, and the downtrodden, that shook the very foundations of the Roman Republic. For years, from 73 to 71 BC, he defied the legions, winning battles against consular armies, inspiring widespread fear in Rome itself. But in the end, he and his thousands of followers were crushed. Spartacus ended up dead, his body never found, and 6,000 of his captured followers were crucified along the Appian Way, the main road leading south from Rome. It was a horrifying, miles-long testament to Rome's unyielding power and its brutal, uncompromising response to rebellion, a gruesome, public art installation of terror. Even if you manage to slip away from your latifundium or household, the challenges are immense. The Roman system was meticulously designed to crush any hope of successful flight, to make escape a suicidal fantasy. The sheer vastness of the empire, while seemingly offering endless places to hide, also made it incredibly difficult to disappear without a trace. There were no anonymous cities where you could blend in without question, no vast wildernesses where you could truly be safe. Roman society was highly interconnected, and every free person was, in a sense, a potential slave catcher. First, you need a forged document to avoid arrest. Roman society was highly stratified, and your appearance, your mannerisms, your lack of proper attire, your inability to speak Latin without an accent, or your failure to produce a patron would immediately mark you as suspicious. Free Romans carried proof of their status. If you couldn't produce a valid certificate of manumission or proof of citizenship, you would be immediately apprehended. Slave catchers, fugitivarii, often professional bounty hunters, roamed the roads, cities, and ports, eager for the reward offered for the return of runaways. They were ruthless, highly effective, and often employed dogs to track scents. Temples and public places often displayed wanted posters describing runaway slaves, sometimes even detailing their physical characteristics or brands. If you are caught, the consequences are horrific. The branding iron, often with the letter F for fugitivus, runaway, would be pressed into your forehead, a permanent, searing mark of your failed attempt, a visible sign of your defiance and your master's ownership. You would be flogged mercilessly, perhaps shackled permanently, and returned to your master, who would likely make an example of you to deter others. Back into slavery you go, but now with a visible scar of your defiance, and a life even more miserable, more tightly controlled, and more brutal than before. Your failed escape would serve as a chilling lesson to every other slave. The Roman system crushed hope through multiple, interconnected mechanisms. Pervasive surveillance. In households, other slaves might be informants, eager to gain favor or avoid punishment by reporting any suspicious behavior. On latifundia, overseers were constantly vigilant, often living among the slaves. Even in cities, the sheer density of population meant constant observation. Lack of communication and organization. Slaves from different regions or estates had little means of communicating or organizing large-scale resistance. The vast distances, language barriers, and lack of widespread literacy for most slaves made coordinated rebellions almost impossible to plan or execute effectively. Overwhelming military might. Rome's legions were the most powerful fighting force in the ancient world. Any organized rebellion, no matter how passionate or initially successful, was ultimately doomed to face the full, brutal might of the Roman army, which had a vested interest in maintaining social order and the economic system. Fear of collective punishment. As you learned, the terrifying threat of mass execution for the actions of one slave was a powerful deterrent, forcing slaves to police each other and report potential rebels. This created an atmosphere of distrust and suspicion within the enslaved community itself. Lack of weapons and training. Slaves were generally unarmed and untrained in warfare, putting them at a severe disadvantage against professional soldiers. Any weapons they might acquire would be crude and improvised. Psychological barrier. The constant dehumanization, the relentless grind of labor, the pervasive fear of arbitrary violence, and the utter lack of agency instilled a deep sense of powerlessness. This psychological conditioning made the very idea of rebellion seem like a suicidal fantasy, a futile gesture against an insurmountable force. The system was designed to break not just the body, but the spirit. No safe havens. There were no abolitionist movements, no underground railroads, no sympathetic foreign powers willing to offer asylum on a large scale. The entire Mediterranean world was dominated by Roman power or similar slaveholding societies. So, while the thought of escape is tempting, a desperate flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness, the reality is that it is futile. The Roman system was too efficient, too brutal, too pervasive. You are trapped, not just by physical chains, but by an entire societal structure designed to keep you in your place, to crush any spark of resistance, and to ensure that your labor would continue until your very last breath. Amidst the crushing despair of Roman slavery, the relentless toil, and the ever-present threat of violence, there existed a glimmer of hope, a distant possibility of escape from the bonds of servitude, manumission. This was the act of being formally freed by your master. It was, for many, the ultimate dream, the light at the end of a long, dark tunnel, the one true aspiration that made the endless days of labor bearable. But even this freedom was not what you, with your modern understanding of liberty and full citizenship, would expect. It was an exit door that was actually more of a window, offering a limited, circumscribed view of true freedom, a conditional liberty that still tied you to your past. Manumission could occur for several reasons, though it was always at the discretion of the master, loyalty and good service. A master might free a slave in his will, manumissio testamento, as a reward for long and loyal service, especially if the slave had managed his affairs well, saved his life, or performed some extraordinary service. This was often done to ensure continued loyalty during the master's lifetime and to provide for his household after his death. It was a strategic act as much as a benevolent one. Old age or infirmity. Sometimes, masters would free elderly or infirm slaves who were no longer productive, manumissio sensu, or informally. This wasn't always an act of kindness. It could also be a pragmatic way to avoid the expense of feeding and housing an unproductive worker, shifting the burden of their care onto the state or their own meager resources. Master's whim or affection. A master might simply decide to free a slave out of genuine affection, a philosophical inclination, influenced by Stoicism, for example, or even to impress his peers with his generosity. This was less common but did happen, particularly in smaller, more intimate households. Peculium, buying freedom. This was perhaps the most common and tangible route for many slaves to gain their freedom. A slave might be allowed to accumulate a peculium, a small fund of money or property that they were permitted to manage. This peculium was legally still the master's property, but the slave was allowed to use it and accumulate from it, often through extra work, small businesses, like running a shop for their master, or tips. If a slave managed to save enough money, they could, theoretically, buy their own freedom from their master. The master would then formally accept the payment and grant manumission. The process of manumission could be formal or informal. Formal manumission, often done through a will, testamento, by declaration before a magistrate, vindicta, or by enrollment in the census, censu, granted the freed slave Roman citizenship, though with limitations. Informal manumission might involve a simple declaration by the master to friends, but offered fewer legal protections and did not automatically grant citizenship. Once freed, you became a libertus, a freedman, if male, or liberta, a freedwoman, if female. This was a significant step up from slavery, a profound change in legal status, but it was not full equality. You got a name, often taking on your former master's praenomen, first name, and nomen, family name, a toga, if male, and a new, albeit circumscribed, identity. You could now legally marry, own property, make contracts, and your children would be born free citizens, with full rights. This was the greatest benefit of manumission. However, your freedom came with significant strings attached, a constant reminder of your former servitude, obligations to your former master, patron you still owed obsequium, respect and deference, and opere, services, to your former master, who now became your patron. This often meant continuing to work for him for a certain number of days a year, performing specific tasks, or supporting him politically. You were still, in many ways, bound to him, just not as property. Your patron could even bring you to court if you failed to fulfill these obligations. Social stigma. You were still looked down upon by full-blooded Roman citizens, ingenui, especially those from old, aristocratic families. The taint of slavery, the mark of your former servitude, would always cling to you. While your children would be free, the social prejudice against freedmen and their descendants could persist for generations. You could not hold high political office, nor could you join the legions, though sometimes exceptions were made. Your social mobility, while possible, was severely limited, a glass ceiling that few could break. Economic challenges. While you could now earn your own money, building a life from scratch with no inherited wealth or established social connections was incredibly difficult. Many freedmen continued to work in the same trades they had as slaves, often as artisans, shopkeepers, minor bureaucrats, or even continued managing their former master's business. Success was possible, but it required immense drive and often continued reliance on the patron. No right to testify against patron. You could not bring a legal action against your former master, your patron, nor could you testify against him in court. This maintained a significant power imbalance. Could you buy your freedom? Maybe, after 40 years of no holidays. The concept of peculium allowed slaves to save, but the amounts were often meager and the cost of freedom was high. It would take decades of relentless, frugal saving, denying yourself every comfort, every small pleasure, to accumulate enough. 40 years of continuous labor, without a single day off, without a vacation, without a moment of true leisure, just to buy back the basic right to your own body and labor. And even then, it was at your master's discretion whether he would accept the payment. He could refuse, or demand an exorbitant sum, or simply die before you accumulated enough. Manumission offered a powerful psychological incentive for slaves to work hard, to be obedient, to avoid punishment, and to hope. It created a faint, distant hope that kept many from despairing entirely, a carrot dangling just out of reach. But it was a hope tethered to immense effort, profound patience, and the ultimate, arbitrary benevolence of your master. It was freedom, yes, but not freedom as we know it today. It was a partial, conditional liberty, a constant reminder of the chains you had once worn and the patron you still served, a bittersweet taste of what true freedom might be. The sun finally sets. The long, brutal day, stretching from before dawn to the last vestiges of twilight, finally draws to a close. You're still breathing. You didn't drop a tray. You didn't get whipped. You didn't collapse from exhaustion. You're still a slave. But you made it. Barely. The physical exhaustion is profound, a deep, aching weariness that permeates every muscle, every bone, every fiber of your being. Your hands are raw, blistered, and possibly bleeding. Your back is screaming, a persistent, burning pain from hours of stooping or grinding. Your feet are bruised, swollen, and aching from walking barefoot on rough terrain. Your body feels like a sack of lead, heavy and unresponsive, dragged through the day by sheer force of will and the omnipresent, gnawing fear of punishment. You are herded back to your sleeping quarters, if you can even call them that. For most field slaves, this means a communal barracks, a vast, low-ceilinged room packed with hundreds, perhaps thousands, of other enslaved bodies. It's a space designed for efficiency, not comfort or dignity. There are no individual beds, no private spaces, no personal belongings. Just rows of thin, scratchy straw mats laid directly on the cold, hard earthen floor, or perhaps on rough wooden planks. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and the faint, lingering odor of human waste, a pervasive stench that clings to everything. It's bitterly cold in winter, with only thin blankets for warmth, and stiflingly hot in summer, the air stagnant and oppressive. Vermin, rats, mice, lice, fleas, are constant companions, gnawing at the edges of your already miserable existence, adding to the discomfort and the risk of disease. You curl back into your corner, finding the same lumpy, uncomfortable straw mat you left this morning. The straw still pokes you, digging into your raw skin, an endless irritation. The air still stinks, a constant assault on your senses, making every breath a chore. Someone snores again, a loud, guttural sound that fills the oppressive silence, punctuated by coughs, murmurs, and the rustling of restless bodies. These are the only lullabies you'll get. There's no quiet moment for reflection, no personal space to process the day's horrors. Your mind, though physically exhausted, is not entirely silent. It replays the day's events. The overseer's harsh glare, the searing pain of your hands on the millstone, the bland, unsatisfying taste of gruel, the constant, low-level hum of fear that has become a part of your very being. You are learning the rhythm, the dull, repetitive, soul-numbing rhythm of Roman slavery. It's a cycle of endless, brutal labor, meager sustenance, and constant threat, broken only by the fleeting, uncomfortable relief of sleep. You are learning to survive, to endure, to suppress your thoughts and feelings, to become a machine. And yet, even now, you dream. Not of grand escapes, not of heroic rebellion, for you've learned the futility and deadly consequences of such thoughts. Your dreams are simpler, more profound, born of desperation. You dream of manumission, that distant, elusive possibility, a faint flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. You dream of freedom, not in its grand, abstract sense, but in its simplest, most profound form. The freedom to choose your own path, to eat what you desire, to sleep in comfort, to simply exist without fear, without the constant threat of violence, without being someone else's property. You dream of waking up somewhere else, anywhere else, but here. The brief, boring relief of sleep washes over you, a temporary oblivion from the pain and the despair. It's a shallow, restless sleep, punctuated by discomfort, the sounds of those around you, and perhaps the occasional nightmare. But it is sleep nonetheless, a precious few hours of unconsciousness before it all starts over again. Maybe, just maybe, you'll survive tomorrow too. You cling to that faint hope, that desperate, animal instinct to simply endure, to see another sunrise, to make it through one more day in this brutal, unforgiving world. The darkness envelopes you, a temporary reprieve before the misery begins anew. You open your eyes again. This time, it's not the oppressive, suffocating darkness of a Roman slave barracks. It's your own ceiling, familiar and comforting, perhaps with a faint crack in the plaster you've always meant to fix. The soft, gentle light of dawn filters through your window, or perhaps the familiar glow of your bedside lamp, casting warm, inviting shadows across your room. You feel the yielding comfort of your mattress beneath you, the soft, plush pillow cradling your head, supporting your neck. The gentle hum of your refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of traffic outside your window, or perhaps the quiet chirping of birds. These are the familiar, comforting sounds of your modern world, a symphony of normalcy you often take for granted. You're not a Roman slave. Not today. You stretch, feeling your muscles uncoil, not from exhaustion and pain, but from the simple pleasure of waking up in your own bed, in your own space, with no one to demand your immediate labor. You breathe deeply, the clean, fresh air filling your lungs, free of dust, stale sweat, and the stench of human misery. You have rights, inherent and non-negotiable, enshrined in laws and societal norms. You have options, a choice of what to eat for breakfast, what clothes to wear, where to go, what to do with your day, what career to pursue, what dreams to chase. You have coffee or tea or whatever beverage you desire, prepared exactly how you like it, in your own mug. Take a moment of profound gratitude, a quiet nod to the past, to the millions upon millions who lived and died in the brutal, dehumanizing grip of Roman slavery, their lives consumed by endless toil, their humanity denied. And feel the deep, deep relief, a wave of profound thankfulness that you were born now and not then. Your worst Monday, your most stressful work week, your most annoying commute, your most frustrating argument, none of it will ever involve being sold with the furniture, or being branded, or facing the whip for a broken jug, or being crucified for someone else's crime. Now drift off to sleep, perhaps for a second, more peaceful slumber, or simply close your eyes, grateful for your soft pillows, your clean water, your freedom, and the quiet, profound comfort of knowing that your life is your own, a privilege that countless others throughout history were tragically denied. Good night.